We've just updated some fascinating data based on asking Americans whether or not they would vote for a blank for president. What do I mean by blank? Well, I mean demographic characteristics or religious characteristics. Gallup, in some instances, was asking Americans as far back as the 1930s whether they would vote for an otherwise well-qualified person who had certain characteristics for president. We've updated those periodically over the years, and boy, have things changed. What about a black person for president? Well, when we asked that back in 1958, just a little more than a third of Americans said they would vote for a black for president. Now we're up to the point where 94% of Americans say they would vote for a black for president. And of course, we have an African American in the White House right here in Washington, Barack Obama. What about an otherwise well-qualified woman for president? Well, back in 1937, only a third of Americans said yes, they would vote for a woman for president. That's now well over 90%. What about a Catholic? Well, that was a big issue back in 1960 when John F. Kennedy was running as a Catholic for the White House. And at that point, we had 71% of Americans who said they would vote for a Catholic. That's now up to 92%. What about someone who's Jewish? Well, back in 1937, a little less than half of Americans said they would vote for an otherwise well-qualified candidate who was Jewish for president. That's now up to 89%. What about a Mormon? Well, that's relevant now. We have actually two Mormons who are or may be running for president, Mitt Romney and John Huntsman. That hasn't changed a lot over the last several decades. At this point, 76% of Americans say yes, they would vote for an otherwise well-qualified Mormon for president. Finally, what about an atheist? This is interesting. Way back in 1958, only 18% of Americans said they would vote for an otherwise well-qualified person who happened to be an atheist for president. Well, that's changed, but not nearly as much as some of the other dimensions I've been talking about. We just re-asked this again, and now 49% of Americans, less than half by 1 point, say they would vote for an otherwise well-qualified person who happened to be an atheist. So even at this point in 2011, being an atheist, out of all the characteristics we look at, looks like it would be the most negative strike against you based on these kind of demographic and religious characteristics. I'm Dr. Frank Newport, Gallup's Editor-in-Chief.